Hello and welcome back to another episode of From the Field. Today we got an awesome one, which is a topic that I think is quite underrated and also interests me quite deeply because I hear a lot of people talking about home automation and the Nest products and all of that and being able to control. I think it's like the Philips Smart light bulbs and everything that around their houses. And then also you're talking about, when they're on the way to a home, they can turn on their heat pump. So when they arrive home, it's like not like -5 degrees inside and all of that type of interesting things. I do have me with me today, Scott Patterson, which is one of our IoT specialists in AWS. He was supposed to be with me in this studio, but he decided that he didn't actually like me, so he ditched me and
Oh, that's rubbish, Casey. Hey, thank you for having me back on. I have been here on the show before talking about IoT and that sort of thing, and it's a passion of mine. And I'm also now somewhat of a host. Tell me how that happened.
Well, we wanted to make much better content. Go out there and have more time to develop content, go into more depth, and actually have time to do these little experiments like what you've carried out here. And so I was like, well, I need some help. So I reached out to the amazing people, and you decided that you're a very social man.
That's
Started to
right. Yeah,
do.
coming to you today from a very rainy Wellington, which is kind of good for me on the topic of what we're about to talk about. But yeah, so let's should we kick off?
Yeah, let's get into it. I'm actually going to say that I'm in Auckland and it's been way too hot recently, like to the point that I have not particularly enjoyed it. It's kind of weird how you get used to that particular climate. So, Scott, if you can, go over a quick overview, what are we going to be exploring today? And, what topics are we going to cover? What do, our viewers have to expect going forward?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so let's kick off with maybe a bit of background about me. I'm a solution architect, real into IoT. I've been working with companies at the moment on industrial IoT. So that's kind of like smart factory stuff. So, yeah, reaching into the machines and the PLCs and pulling out the data points. We're talking hundreds of machines and tens of thousands of data points a second, and then getting them into AWS, mashing them up, and doing all sorts of things from there. So we can do machine health with predictive maintenance. We can forecast the materials that you need to make your production runs. Can build entire digital twins of your factory down to your lines into the machines to give you a really good view of what's going on. So it's really good for me to kind of come back to grassroots of electronics and try to put some of these smaller components together and see what problems I can solve. And home automation is such a cool thing for that. You get to really turn your geek on and get into it. So yeah, like I was didn't have to, I guess, search too far before I found a problem that I wanted to solve. So yeah, I live in Wellington but rurally, so we're off services there. um so we don't have means we don't have water to our house. So we've got two 25,000 litre water tanks, and that's for drinking water and showers and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I recently moved in there, so look, I didn't know how long 50,000 liters lasted. It seems quite long, but 3 or 4 months without rain in summer is it actually a problem? So I thought I'd start monitoring it. It turned out it had a already had kind of an industrial looking unit on it, um, but it clearly was broken and wasn't working. So I ripped that off and started from scratch. Um, so I'll give you an idea what it looks like. Let's bring that photo up. So yeah, on the top left there, we can see there's two tanks there, kind of in the bush. I should probably chop that back a bit so they don't so they don't pierce the side of the tanks. I'm hoping that they're fairly strong, um, weighing probably 25 ton each. And in the middle there, we've got an interesting contraption, and underneath that aluminium plate there is a hole in the top of the tank, and I am aiming a sensor down that hole. We'll go into what that sensor is soon. And then I've got some kind of spacers to hold it nicely there. Whack some self-tapping screws in it, and away we go. Also got that big antenna heading off there because the house is way up the hill. And then on the top right, that you don't look too hard at that, but that's where all the electronics are. And you go to Bunnings or Mitre 10 and get one of those big rounds of silicon, and you just got to make it waterproof however you can. So it doesn't look that nice, but the electronics have stayed dry for over a year now. So yeah, I first took this up as an experiment, and it's been running for a long time ever since. So,
Well,
where do we start talking about when we look at this? So, do we start talking about everything forward of that sensor or everything behind the visualization? The things that I use, but I think we should start with the sensor. So, start with the choices and things we need to make around that. I'm going to talk. Um, I'm going to talk quite generally about the pros and cons and the choices, design decisions that you have to make, because there are a few, and I'll try and relate that back to my experiment as well, because this is I guess this is the first experiment for me. I'm going to roll this out to there's another tank there that I might connect one to, and we've got some irrigation tanks as well that might connect that to, and just see how much data we can start to put in one place. It'll be quite exciting. So yeah, look, there's so many areas, and I'd like to hear in the chat if you've got any questions and how to get started, and like where you find the information to go and investigate this sort of stuff. Um, I had to find a lot of the things out the hard way, so I'll try and share those where I can. And I also want to hear if you've tried things out and maybe come up with challenges and things like that too. So I'll kick into it. So sensors. We've really got to start with asking, what are we monitoring? What is that thing that we are measuring and we're going to make decisions on and we're interested in? Usually it's something physical, and it's really easy to start with environmental things like temperature or humidity or pressure, because those are kind of easy to understand. As a person, when it comes to validating that data, making sure it's within sensible bounds. Like if you're monitoring the temperature of outside, it's between, well, maybe in Auckland it's probably about 28, but in Wellington it's a bit less than that. So you can kind of validate that as you go. Um, and so for my example, that was quite a hard choice. I I've got those big plastic cylinders, and there's some water in it. But there's a whole lot of environmentals acting on that water. So, what's the best way that I could measure those environmentals? So, like, um, that all-in-one off-the-shelf device that was already on it, that had a pressure sensor that got suspended in the tank. So that would do something like measure the force of gravity from the water above it pressing down. So the more pressure that it read, the more water that's probably in the tank because it's heavier. If that makes sense. Um, and so that was looked like quite an industrial piece of kit. I considered using something like that, but I thought it would be really hard to calibrate. So you'd have to get that length of wire just right. You probably can't touch the bottom of the tank, and you'd have to get where the length of wire stopped as well, just right. And I thought actually submersing electronics in water would present a whole lot of new challenges, like water tightness. Electronics don't really like water, and because it's drinking water, um, making sure that like no microbes and stuff are gonna grow on that wire. I don't know the first thing about that, so that scared me a little bit. So I was like, okay, I need something that's external from the water, um, and yeah, there wasn't
so
really much around.
a really interesting point there, Scott. So some metals are actually naturally antimicrobic. So copper and silver, for example, and actually like shred bacteria and viruses at the cellular level. Um, so that's been really quite interesting. That's also why like a lot of the old school hospitals have brass handles to help with
Cool.
that type of.
Cool. It would have been good to know that. How did you know that back in school days? Remembering.
It was, one of those benders where you like it's late at night and you should be sleeping and then you go down the YouTube rabbit hole. That was, I don't know why that got recommended to me or what I was watching, but yeah, that was just one of those little tidbits or piece of information. So I'm not entirely sure how accurate it is, but um, yeah,
Yeah, cool.
it sounds cool
It's
and
it
plausible.
sounds legit.
Yeah,
Cool.
because they also know that silver was used to detect poisons
Ah,
as well. So
cool. Well, yeah. Look, I wish I knew that. I could. That I think that would be an experiment in itself. I don't know how to measure that either. So landed on an ultrasonic sensor of all things. So I'm not sure if anyone's done this with this sort of for that sort of application, but basically what's on the screen, and this is exactly what I'm using, is a parking sensor for a car. So they're usually in bumpers of cars, and how they work is they send a number of pulses using pulse width modulation, and then it kind of waits for that echo back. So it's looking to hit something, have a reflection, and then the pulse width of that received echo is directly proportional to the distance that it traveled. And so that means I can measure how far away the top of that water is from a fixed point. Because I know the capacity and the height of that fixed sensor, I could calculate how full the tank is. Now, keen viewers will see that I've got two tanks. They are connected together down at the bottom. So I'm making a big assumption here that when the pump pumps the water out, that it's going to automatically and equally balance. So I only really need to measure the distance of one tank, and then I can basically times that by two to find the literage in both tanks. How did my logic check out with that, Casey? Do you reckon?
yeah, it does make sense. But as long as both tanks are on level ground, because obviously water will flow to the lowest point.
That's right. That's right.
Mate,
I should check that.
what
It's probably roughly the same.
what did you say though? Like I think earlier, 2 centimeters is roughly how many liters of water?
600 liters. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so
I think we use about 1 or 2 centimeters a day for two of us.
so that means like if one of the tanks are like sitting like 2 centimeters lower, then you're only off by 600 liters. That's not that much.
Yeah, it's a day's worth of water, or half
Mm.
a day really.
You can think of it as like a reserve. You know how when on your gas tanks and stuff like that, they have like when it shows empty, it's not actually empty.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's a design choice.
An outcome. So
Mm.
that's how I kind of made my choice about what type of sensor that I was looking for. I found this one on the screen, and I'll go into it soon. But um, it's got two parts. It's got that the actual thing that sends out the frequency pulses, and then it's got like a control board that takes the inputs and converts them into like a digital signal so I can read off the pins. So a really nice, easy way to do it. I just get a distance number back from that
And you'll
board.
show the code for that later,
Yeah,
I believe. Awesome.
yeah. So there's quite a few common options when it comes to that sort of interface for a sensor. Um, and this is really what you should look for. So Um, I squared C, sometimes misreferred to as I2C, is called, let me get this right, inter-integrated circuit. It's basically a two-wire serial communication, and it's bidirectional as well. So you have two main lines. There's a SDA line, which is for data, and you have a SCL line, which is the clock line, so that synchronizes the data speeds. This is probably the most popular interface. Um, And if you just bring me up on camera, I'll show you. Here's a here's a this is a pressure sensor. You can see the actual sensor there. There's a bunch of logic components on there, but it's got some pins. They aren't pins yet. Here's one that I've soldered some headers and pins on. But on that we've got a ground and a power input. But then we've got the SCL and SDA. So this little board can communicate over I squared C, and we'll go into how to connect that up shortly.
Awesome.
Cool. The next thing, which I think is a little bit older, it's called SPI, Serial Peripheral Interface, and that has actually two data lines. Um, I haven't had too much experience with that one, but you are looking for the lines are called MOSI, MOSI, and MISO, MISO. I always get them around the wrong way. And then you might have heard of UART as well, Universal Asynchronous Receiver Transmitter. So that's your typical serial plug. So you would have seen the small ones are RS232 and RS485, and they're around a lot of the place. But you're not likely to use this one in your home experiments. Um, and then what I haven't mentioned there is, I guess, digital interfaces of various types. You'll usually connect this up to a digital input in your microcontroller and your board, and then you assign that pin to that it's a digital pin. You can also, in a lot of boards, assign that pin as an analog pin, and that's where you get to receive the data directly into the board, so it's not going into one of those boards that I showed before that can do some conversions. You're actually receiving varying voltage of current, or varying a varying voltage or a varying current, and you'll need to kind of convert that to digital at some point as well. And a pro tip here: it's easiest to pick a common sensor that's used, and one that's already has a library, like a code library, from either the manufacturer itself or the community might created one as well. And an example of that is some of these sensors have really raw outputs, um, and they might have quite specific memory addresses that you need to refer to. Some libraries have already sorted all that out, and you can interface with the library, and it's a lot easier. So, um, yeah, that's the sensors. Something you should probably also do with the sensors is have a read of the. Most sensors will come with a data sheet, and it's like a technical specifications sheet, and that will talk about all the operating parameters of the sensor, and things like temperature. So it might say it can go down to -2 degrees and up to 100, or something like that. Also relative humidity. So often sensors don't like a lot of humidity. Um, and then voltage ranges and all sorts of those things. So have a after you've kind of got an idea of one, just double check the data sheet to make sure it's going to be correct for your operating environment.
Yeah, for example, in your case, you obviously inside a water tank, so there's going to be a lot of humidity in there, and it's pretty much a giant plastic greenhouse, so it's going to be like 60 plus, oh, quite a lot hotter inside there than anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah. So if you think of applications like, if you took this application and tried to measure the height of stormwater drains. So you think manhole cover, underneath that is a drain with heaps of running water. You can measure how high that water was by this application as well, potentially. But underneath that manhole cover, that doesn't have much oxygen going through it or air going through it. So it's going to be super humid, and the sun's baking that metal cover all day. So, it's going to be 60 degrees or something. So potentially that's going to be a lot harder of a situation to manage than just having a sensor out in the air, in you know normal air conditioned nice environments.
Yep. And also, if you buy a seed, and you have to take into account the salt content in the air.
Yeah, yeah, for longevity, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Um, so kind of relating that back to how that works for me, I'm going to try and build up a diagram over the course of this. So we've got the ultrasonic sensor there. It's got four main wires or pins that you need to care about. You need to give it power. So there's a ground and a positive 5 volt. So that power can often come from the board, from the microcontroller board. So it will have like a common 5 volt rail and it will have a ground as well. Um, you also usually find a 3.3 volt. So just check what your sensor needs. And then that trigger and echo pins, they're the ones that I was talking about. And in the datasheet, it actually tells you how to use those. So you need to send a high signal to the trigger, and I'm talking digital signal to the trigger, um, and for a particular number of microseconds, and then drop that signal to low, and then the actual sensor itself will send the pulses and then give you a response back on the echo line. So, yeah, sensors work different ways. You need to read how yours works.
Yep. And a high signal in this case would be sending a voltage, like a predefined amount of voltage um, into that connector.
Yep. Right. So, moving on to microcontrollers. And this is where I could have absolutely filled the page up of potential options and brands and everything like that. Um, so, we'll talk about a couple. But yeah, so for we'll do this at the lens of a I guess a home automation project as well. So I really like the things from Seed Studio. So um, we'll talk about it soon. I've picked something with a ESP32 based chipset. There's all sorts of different chipsets, um, and this one here, actually, I've got another one. It's just part of a thing. This one here is about the size of a thumbnail, um, and I'll bring up a diagram of that soon. But if you find an ESP32 based microcontroller, you can get all sorts of combinations, whether they have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, or I've got one. I've also got one here that has a cellular modem in it. This is an XB3. Um, so we'll talk about networks soon. But if you wanted to communicate over a cellular network, this one's got pins pre-soldered in, so that's quite nice. Um, and you typically communicate with these things over a USB connection, a serial connection to your computer, so you can upload the code, and then it can run itself. They've usually got this one doesn't. They've usually got a button on them for resetting them, like doing a hard reset, they've often got a boot button as well. So if you hold down the boot button, it kind of doesn't run the program and um, lets you load in new programs. And often a board as well. So this board is designed to be integrated into your product, into your thing, to give it cellular connectivity basically, and you can run some code on it. Um, Often these sorts of things will come with a development style board as well. So that thing there is what I just showed you, pushed into the board. Um, and this has all sorts of inputs and interfaces on it for designing applications basically. So it's for developers. It's got switches on it. You can it's got buttons on it that turn things on and off. It's got an I squared C sensor in it, so you can get comfortable playing with that. Um, and you can hook in a battery or USB as well. This one doesn't actually have a USB input. That's why I like the Seed Studio ones. It's an the Seed Studio are at ESP32C3 Xiao model, and they'll just powered off a USB-C. They're really cool. There's lots of others. Arduino you would have heard of, Raspberry Pi Zeros, and all really cheap now.
Yeah, I have a Raspberry 4 at home, but it's really annoying me because it connects to the Wi-Fi perfectly fine when when I installed a base image, and then as soon as it updates itself, the Wi-Fi just gets bricked. Um, so yeah, they
I
can be
know
also incredibly frustrating at the same time. But
that's a Raspberry Pi 4.
yep,
Sweet. That's like ARM based architecture, and like I'd probably class it as a microprocessor. Um,
yep.
Microcontrollers are a lot smaller than that as well. So the Zero, real good for kind of low power home automation usage. So yeah, look, I've landed on this thing here. So I showed you it before. It's a bit hard to show you with the small camera, but it's about the size of your thumbnail, and they're about $7, I think. So real cheap to get started. They've got enough power to do what you want, and they've got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth Low Energy on board out of the box. So you can see the little reset button, the little boot button, and there's that little thing in the middle is for an antenna. And the one that it comes with is tiny. So we'll talk about the limitations of that soon. Um, and yeah, I've got when you pick a board, you need to go and match that up to your sensor. So you need to check, and I've got the pinout diagram there on the right. You need to check that it can support things like I squared C and SPI or whatever your sensor needs. Um, so this board supports quite a lot of different things, and you can see some of them, the blue ones and the kind of peachy ones. They can be digital inputs or analog inputs or outputs, and so you can kind of assign those in code as well. So really useful. So the way that in my example that works is I'm going to connect all those four uh, four pins into my Seed Studio board. We've got the 5 volt. You can see there on the top right of the pinout. We've got the ground, and then we've got we I think in my code I'm just using the GPIO, just normal digital inputs. I think I'm using D9 and D8, but we'll be able to have a look at that soon. Um, yeah, any questions about that, Casey?
Just power on through.
Yeah.
The one other aspect, like once I think you're going to be talking about. Um, Actually, what are you going to be talking about next?
Oh, let's let's
Choice.
let's click next.
Tell me.
Yeah, the equipment. So, and this is where I think I've found the most iteration. So, the code is somewhat, no, I don't want to say easy, but it's straightforward. It doesn't change as much as you think it would change. You can kind of get it going on the bench, and then when you actually want to have it in the field, there's a whole bunch of things that you need to consider. So I'm running. I've got. I've got a moisture sensor here with my Seed Studio, um, and
Let me just
I've got
bring it
a.
up. Just 1 second.
I
There you go. You should be sweet now.
just trying to get the light on it. I've got the Seed Studio board with some headers and some connectors there. It's going out to a moisture sensor. Um, Basically, this has got a ground and a power and then an analog out. So that's going. I'm going to assign that to an analog input, and this is for house plants, right? This goes inside. So I've just got the tiny little antenna looks like that, and you can just stick it on the inside of a case. Drill a little hole in it, um, put the case back on it, and there we go. It's all good. This doesn't have a seal in it. It's probably not. It won't be submersible. Um, it's probably not all that waterproof. So if it was in 60 degrees, there'd be condensation on the inside. Electronics don't typically like that. Um, Another option you can find is like there's so many different types of cases, but there's one here that I want to try out because I want to put these moisture sensors in the veggie garden outside, right? So I can automate the watering of that. So I found this case, and this is a tiny little case that is IPX8 rated, and if you open it up like that, it's actually got this like real sticky resiny gel in it that you kind of just squish the board into, and then it creates kind of a nice tight seal around that. So I'm really looking forward to experimenting with that one.
Does the gel also help with like heat dispersion?
I'd say it would. Like you're not going to get um the little condensation forming inside. It's going to, spread out. And then the next thing, and probably quite a important thing, is how you're going to power this thing. So I'm lucky, because where the water tanks are, there's also a big water pump to get the water out of it. So that means there's 230-volt power there. So I can just run a USB, USB plug adapter, and run my board off that. If you don't have that, if it's more remote, um, then maybe you need to look at battery. And cool, so that battery, that means it has a finite life. Now you have to look at current draw. So how do you measure the current draw out of your board? Um, in one of my boards, you can put a jumper, and then you can actually read the current draw out of it in your code, um, to make sure that you can optimize that. And there's a bunch of different things that I can share as well. So different boards will have different operating modes. So you can actually usually put a board into deep sleep, and that means it will just have a little bit of a clock, a wait timer, and it will go into sleep and not run anything else except the clock. And then after the clock watchdog timer runs out, it will switch back on and go through a loop again. So that's a really good way of saving battery. Um, you want to make sure the code is running, that is running, is actually optimized as well. So if something hangs, or if something waits for an external input or external response acknowledgement, that's just battery that you're using. So maybe you need to look at solar. I've got an idea for that. So here's another cheap thing. We've got a little, I think this is a 9-watt solar panel, and we've got a little power management board here. We've actually got a tiny little battery hanging off the side of that. It's 100 milliamp hours. Yeah, it's so tiny. Um, and if I hold that over there, you can actually sit. No, you can't. But it's got a little LED on it that shows it's actually charging the battery at the moment. And what this does is got USB outputs, so you can literally plug the USB cable of your board straight into this. If you had power as well, you can also plug power into the power management board, and it would charge the battery. Um, so really easy way to add kind of solar, and offload a bit of the power management to another thing. I think this was about $20 all up. So um, I really want to try that out with the veggie garden outside type sensor. You've got a bunch of connectors that you need. So obviously headers. If the board doesn't have headers on it, then you need to buy some of those, solder them on, and then figure out how you're going to um, use those connectors to connect your sensor up to your board. And then antennas as well. It really depends on how far away you are from a base station. LoRaWAN, Wi-Fi, whatever we're talking. Um, Depends on what sort of antenna you need, and there's a bunch of different ones. I started off with the tiny little paper thin one that I showed before, and I was having frequent dropouts. I couldn't it would connect once in 10 times. So I went and iterated that, and upgraded to there. And I guess they kind of look like this. If you unscrew that, it's got this little tiny connector that plugs into the board, and then the idea with this is you drill a hole in your case, put that through the case, and then you put a washer and a nut on the other side, and it kind of holds that out. These are fairly waterproof, I think, and then you can thread the aerial on, and then they usually go like that too. So that looks pretty pro. I like that one. Um, yeah, so generally a good idea. That was like $1.50 kind of thing. Okay, so got that. So for my application, I'm using USB power and haven't had any problems with that. I'm looking forward to trying out battery, and that's a whole nother set of monitoring. Okay, moving on. Now, in your application, you got to think about how you're going to get the data out of that device. You've already got data out of the sensor onto the board. How are you going to connect out on your private network or over to the internet and send some data? So Wi-Fi is an easy one, probably the easiest one to get started on because you've probably got Wi-Fi at home. You just code on your SSID and probably hard code your username and password into the device, and away you go. There's usually really good Wi-Fi support in terms of libraries, device libraries. If your device supports Wi-Fi, then there will be a library for it. Hold me to that. And then maybe if it's a bit further away, you maybe start thinking about LoRaWAN. It's better for long distances, but you need to run a gateway, so another device that jumps onto something with internet. So maybe over Ethernet to your router or Wi-Fi to your router, and then you actually need a network server at the other end as well. So we at AWS have a managed LoRaWAN network server, IoT core for LoRaWAN, um, and yeah, that's possible. Um,
The other consideration, Scott, is each of these network protocols have different throughput capabilities. I believe LoRaWAN is like 20 kilobytes or something quite small.
oh,
We
I don't know
listed
the
that
numbers
probably.
on that. Don't know the numbers. I
Mm.
need to check. But yeah, it's also possible that your country or your town has an existing LoRaWAN network that you can get access to, so you don't have to kind of build your own network at home. When we talk about LTE, so that is cellular, and we can talk about 5G, 4G, 3G, normal ones that your phones use, right? There's also some specialized IoT networks that run over cellular. So talking about Cat M1 and NB-IoT. So Spark have all these 5 networks. Spark have IoT networks that you can get SIM cards for. And how do you pick? I guess Cat M1's really good for moving devices that aren't static. It's got higher bandwidth and generally better coverage in New Zealand. Um, and then you might use NB-IoT for lower data usage. It uses less power. It's kind of more efficient to send data over there, so it means your battery life lasts longer. But it might restrict you onto some using some protocols versus the other ones. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but probably usually Wi-Fi. If you can find a board that does that, then a lot of problems will go away for you.
Yeah, I
Um,
was gonna say that Wi-Fi would probably be the easiest one to start on, just because well everyone has a Wi-Fi point at home, right?
yeah.
Well,
When you start talking about cellular modems, um, there's a whole bunch of different cellular network kind of things that you need to configure and know about. It just takes more experimenting. It's possible. Um, and the actual IoT SIM cards you can get from Spark are actually quite cheap, so don't rule it out. But yeah, Wi-Fi if you can. So I've updated. I was having trouble with Wi-Fi, and I kind of still am. So I'll show you that soon. So I've added a bigger external Wi-Fi and tried to get it at the top of the tank. Saw at the photo. I think that's like a 9 dBi or something like that, and that's it's mostly working. But I've got still some delays, so I'll show you what that looks like a bit later on. Cool. So now you have picked a kind of a radio or a network to send your data over. Now you need to pick the protocol that you use. And this might be restricted by the network choice that you made. Um, and it's also going to inform the libraries that you need to use in your device code. So MQTT is a pub sub protocol, and so you publish to a topic, and you can subscribe to updates in that topic as well. It's got real easy integration with AWS IoT Core. So um, AWS IoT Core is kind of a managed MQTT broker. So you can define topics on that and um, generate a client certificate, load that onto your device, and away you go. We've got libraries that can help you with the communications in that, and quite often the board will have as well. HTTP is the example there is just using HTTP APIs to go and post your data to somewhere. HTTP is a little less efficient than MQTT, and yeah, definitely requires a little bit higher bandwidth. And then you've got CoAP, which is kind of becoming increasingly popular because it uses less battery and it's more efficient with the bandwidth usage. There's a couple of caveats with that. I wouldn't really recommend looking at that for home usage just yet. You need to run your own CoAP server. So that's kind of roll your own, and then you need to integrate that with IoT Core data plane APIs yourself. And then it doesn't do encryption in transit or device authentication by itself. So you need to kind of go figure out how you're going to do that. So that's why MQTT is so good because it's got such good support from our side, and we take care of a lot of things. So no surprise there. I've picked MQTT. Um, I like it. It's a kind of established messaging protocol, and it's really um, what was I going to say? It's really you can really understand what's going to happen if you're publishing messages, and you can just open a client and look at a client looking at the topic, and you can just see the messages coming through. It's like they either come through or they kind of don't. Um, it's yeah.
Well, you can say that for pretty much anything related to network, right, and security. It either works or it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so moving on, we'll talk about code. And this will be restricted by what your board can support. Um, and the Seed Studio ones are quite good because you can use MicroPython or Arduino. What's MicroPython? So it's a MicroPython is compatible with Python, the Python 3 compiler. It's actually written in C under the hood, but it's optimized to run on a microcontroller. So really good for geeks like us who already use Python for other experiments, other aspects of our jobs. We can just jump over to a little embedded device and start using Python on that. That's really cool. Um, it's
One
only with the
question
evolution of devices now that you can actually do that because it takes up quite a bit of resources. Casey.
Yeah, so one quick question I got there because I've seen this on MicroPython. I thought about one of the big differentiators for like the Python ecosystem is the amount of libraries essentially out there. Is there any consideration that you need to think about in terms of using Python libraries for MicroPython?
Yeah. I guess a big benefit of MicroPython is you can bring the libraries that you're used to. Couple of caveats there that libraries can often be quite large in size, and little devices don't have a lot of storage. So just kind of be wary of that. And like there might be an optimized library you can use instead. But they say that you can bring along about 80% of the libraries. There's about 80% support, depending on which features you're kind of looking at. So yeah, good. I would say that's pretty cool support for being able to use Python instead of C.
Yeah, I do like C, but I'm not really an overly a fan of dealing with pointers and memory management and all of that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, once you get out of practice with it, it becomes a ordeal.
yeah, it's quite low level. I'm guessing there'll be some viewers at the moment yelling at the screen, going, "Nah, C is the way to go."
Well, C is
You, mu-
would be the most efficient way of doing it.
yeah, well, yeah,
It depends how
um,
you measure the efficiency.
yeah. It depends how low level we want to get. You might also see in your googling, you might see Circuit Python as well. So that's a fork of MicroPython, kind of a subset. It's forked by a company called Adafruit. ADA Fruit. So they develop a lot of devices as well, sensors and boards. So worth a look at. I've bought some stuff from there. And then we've got Arduino that you would have heard of, been around for ages. It's a kind of a variant or a subset of C++ as well. And I've written stuff in Arduino for the Seed Studio stuff. I'll show you that shortly. And yeah, it's quite easy to pick up, and there's no real gotchas there. I quite like it.
For because like when you think about coding, especially in like these like when you're doing integrations into platforms, a lot of times there's SDKs out there. Like, are there SDKs like in the IoT space?
Usually there'll be libraries that come with your board, or libraries that come with the platform that you're interfacing with. So um, at AWS we do have IoT device SDKs that you can use. They've got MQTT clients and things like that. We've got one in C++, in Python, JavaScript, and Java as well. So quite well covered there. And yeah, I've used those before. They do real nice kind of certificate management and implement things like over-the-air updates. Um,
Yep. And as I was looking into this, because a lot of the time, like I didn't want to like either buy a device because I didn't know if it was the right device or like how to interact with it. So as I was doing like my little upskill, I actually came across this site called Tinkercard, which is, in my opinion, like it's quite basic, but it actually gave me the opportunity to start playing around with a lot of these sensors and these microcontrollers that you are mentioning, and like just start doing a little bit of code. And it looked a lot like the code that you're going to show later today. I think I actually made one which it would operate a Arduino valve and then fill a tank, and then based on a sensor inside this virtual tank, it would then turn the valve on and off, and
cool,
then there'll be a sleep. So it would actually, once it reached like 80%, it would close the input valve and then open the output valve, and then wait until it got to 20%, and then just did that over and over again. So that is quite fun. And then you can, I think I added a light to it what blinks while I was filling for like alerting reasons. I was finding a little tutorial, so I thought that was really cool to get started and just play around without having to, spend any money or like get too serious. I
yep.
believe it's aimed for like college level or a high school if you're in America, like level kids. So
So what stage would you use that in kind of your design on this? Would you build it in Tinkercad first and get an idea of the logic you needed, and then look to build that in Arduino code, or
So what I was looking at is like getting the electronics, because it doesn't support all of the electronics out there, but it supports the subset that of the common ones. And then I just wanted to see like how do I put it together? It has a virtual breadboard, has the
cool?
little area where you can like write your code and upload to the virtual processor or um, microcontroller, and then like it just emulates the workflow. So
Yep,
because I'm quite a visual and hands-on learner, for me it was a lot easier to do that than to read you know tutorials and or like watch YouTube videos and stuff like that. Just
cool.
getting hands-on and just seeing what broke and when it blatantly didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, and you remind me, actually getting a breadboard is probably a good tip, like a physical breadboard at home. It's got a bunch of holes in it, and they're all connected by kind of rails, so you can go and plug things in and move things around before you productionize something or solder stuff. I just get in and start soldering stuff. If it's wrong, I unsolder it. Probably not that good.
Yeah, I don't think that's how you're supposed to do the proof of concepts for electronics, but
Oh well,
you're a specialist in this one.
life's too short.
Hmm.
Um, Okay, so what do we talk about? We talked about running the code on the board. We know the network we're sending over. We know the message protocol we're sending over. So therefore, the type of message. Something's got to be the other end to receive it. IoT Core is really good for. Let's just focus on IoT Core. Really, it's real good for MQTT. It can provision your client certificate, which then you'd go and load in. And then it does all your permissions about what you're allowed to actually reach into on the AWS side, what that certificate's allowed to do on the AWS side. So are you allowed to connect to that topic and publish and subscribe to this topic, but not that one, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Scott, just to let you know, we are about got about 8 minutes left. So
Oh,
if
do
you
we?
want to push through this like a
Yeah,
quick
man.
smart picks, it'll be really good to show the dashboard and the code.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about that. So um, I am publishing to IoT Core. I'm also subscribing to that same topic using Mosquito. Mosquito is another MQTT bridge, um, and we'll go into that soon. But then there's options of how to visualize this stuff. So there's a lot of architectural design decisions that I've made because I don't want to lock myself into any particular way. So that's why I'm kind of publishing to cloud first, um, and then uh, and then figuring out what to do from it there. It's kind of evolved and developed over the time. So yeah, look, lots of options to build your own or use open source Home Assistant, or use Grafana for a dashboard, that sort of thing. And here's what the final kind of existing architecture looks like. I'm running Home Assistant on EC2 in a Docker container. Same with Mosquito, and then Home Assistant just reaches into Mosquito to get the data, and that's kind of kept in sync with the IoT core topics. Okay, let's look at some juicy code. Um, oh, I don't want to give it away yet. So here's the code that's running on my device, and I just want to point out that um, this is this is I guess my code. It's experimental. Um, there's no guarantees that if you go and copy and paste this into your own, that it's going to work. It's just what I've been developing and what's working for me so far. So where to start? I'm pulling in, MQTT client, Wi-Fi libraries, things like that. Things I'm going to need to use. Defining the MQTT topic I'm going to post to. You can see I'm already trying to develop um, extensibility into this. So in case I want to add different devices. Um, and then I'm kind of hard coding the height of the water tanks in there as well because I know that's not going to change.
If it did,
This
concerned.
If it did, yeah, I'd have bigger problems. Um, this is where we get to in these definitions are where we get to kind of assign things to the pins. So we're actually using D0, D1 here, and I could change these to whatever I've sold it into, as long as that pin supports that sort of input or output. Um, Setting up the Wi-Fi's. Um, the setup will this block here will run when the device first spins up. So I've commented out if I wanted to connect to the board using USB, I obviously need to start the serial thing there, and then I'm basically setting my pin modes. Um, I'm setting my Wi-Fi mode, disconnecting if it's connected already, um, configuring the sleep timer, and then connecting to AWS. And then, so what that does is connects to the AWS IoT endpoint. I've saved all the secret stuff like my Wi-Fi details and certificate details and IoT endpoint details into secrets.h. So I'm not going to bring that up.
Oh man.
Um, I don't want some random data in
And
there
here I
from Casey or
here I thought I was just gonna like randomly drive past your house, just like start spamming it.
um, yeah. There's not too much error handling and stuff in here. Um, I just wanted to keep it short. It's like less than 100 lines. So that's connecting. It goes into like this is the main loop, and I'll go back up in a second. But this is the main loop. So we're writing low to the trigger pin. This is what I was talking about before, and then we're waiting a little bit, and then um, we're writing high for 20 milliseconds, um, and then low. This is what the documentation told me to do to send a a, a message, basically a high signal on the trigger pin for a minimum 10 microseconds, and then that would trigger the sensor board to go and create the pulses, and then um, we're reading the echo back in here. Um, so that literally gives me a distance in centimeters, which was really nice. So all I really needed to do is put that into a nice message. So we got published message over here, creating a JSON document. I'm publishing the raw distance and also the water depth in centimeters. Um, Soon I'm going to figure out the liters, and I'm going to start reading things in liters, but I might do that in the cloud side to give me a bit more flexibility.
And also like just save CPU cycles right on the device. Although that doesn't really matter to you because it's hard coded in, hardwired into your power, so you don't really mind if it uses extra cycles. Because at the end of the day, all you need to do is find the volume of a cylinder and then convert that into a volume of water because that's 1 to 1 in metric.
Yeah, that's right. That's not going to change.
Yeah.
Um, so we're publishing that message, and then we're disconnecting from the topic. Whoops, waiting a little bit, and then we're disconnecting from the Wi-Fi and going to sleep. So this is the deep sleep that I was talking about. ESP Deep Sleep Start is kind of like a device library that's it's inbuilt to my device, and it uses something like it was like 40 microamps or something like that when it's actually asleep. So really good way, and this is me starting to figure out how to do this for this board. So when I switch to batteries, life is good. Okay, so this is the code right from the start. What happens right at the end? I'm using Home Assistant. Home Assistant's an open source home automation platform software that's it's written in Python, and people often run that on a Raspberry Pi in their house. I've chosen to do it in the cloud because reasons, um, I security reasons basically. So I didn't really like the idea of running something at home just on public internet, whatever. So am running it on EC2, but I've got a WAF in front of it. I can lock it down. I've got a certificate that's um, in Amazon Certificate Manager. I'm using Route 53 for DNS. So fairly comfortable now that it's up there and it's all good. Perhaps later in future, I might look at publishing data privately on a private network, then start thinking about VPC, VPN, but that's getting too complicated for now. Okay,
Yep.
let's look at Home Assistant. So hopefully you can see that. No, that's made it worse. We've got a gauge here. You can see it's full. It's pretty full, but you can see it wasn't like it wasn't on Thursday. We haven't had rain for weeks, so it was actually getting like 3/4 full. And then you can see this is a weather station right next to me. We had about maybe 10 mils of water, and so it's just shot right up, and it's full, and then it's draining again over time, and then we've had a bit more rain today, so that's gone back up again. So real cool example of how that's working. Um, and Yeah, what I want to do is create alerts, but this is another design decision. Where do I create them? Should I create them in this, end user software that I might use for just for mobile app? I might use control panel or something else, or should I create them at the IoT core layer and I can create an IoT rule that looks for a specific threshold and then sends me a push notification over SNS or something like that. Um, that's the current things I'm looking at the moment. Casey, do you have any opinions?
Um, it's kind of difficult, but I would say that the greatest flexibility you'd have would be just running it through SNS, because then you can pump that pretty easily into any platform, be it Slack, like a mobile push notification, etc. Like it's
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because I want to keep that flexibility. And so if I kind of center all the things around the IT core and keep the data in the cloud, then I can add new devices in there without affecting what I've got set up separately because I'm likely just leave those and forget about them for a while. Um,
as you do.
yeah.
So I
So
just sorry
yes,
to jump in. We are a bit over time,
don't
but
worry.
just before people leave, I want to do a couple of like as a housekeeping. So if you have liked this content and you want to come in and be alerted when we're actually doing streams, you know what's coming next, because we are posting. The way we're doing this every 2 weeks, and we are making sure that every quarter we have a schedule published, so you can actually decide if you want to pop in, for one particular show that is covering a topic, or if you want to go there and find myself with Scott and then recommend a like a topic. We're always looking for new topic ideas, and also we are looking for feedback on the show and the content and pacing. That this is something that is going to be evolving, and we are really, really wanting that feedback. So if you can actually go to that post survey that I've just posted as well and give us that feedback, that'd be great. Back to you, Scott, for you to just to quickly wrap up.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for that. Yeah. Like this whole thing has been created so I can do cool stuff with the data use case afterwards. So I'm trying to get all sorts of data from the environmentals around my house. I want to do things like forecasting. So I want to know if I'm trending towards running out of water. Um, and so if I can send that data that I'm collecting into S3, match that up with forecast data or weather observations from historical, then I can start to, maybe forecast if I'm going to run out in 3 months, kind of thing. That's really exciting. Um,
Mm.
yeah, but enough for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. And especially also, this is your was it debut of as a host.
So
I
you.
hope that you enjoyed yourself, and also all of our viewers. I hope you enjoyed the topic as well. Do you have anything that you want to end with?
No, I'm just really excited to be here and do the next chat. So I'm really hoping that people reach out, tell us what you want to hear, tell us what you want us to build, and we can experiment with anything. And yeah, options are limitless. Cheers.
Cool and awesome. I just realized that I accidentally hit the thanks for saying. Cool, everyone. Thank you very much for the show. Thank you for sticking around, and do reach out for the time being. Matiwa.